Assassin's Creed has been one of the most impactful game series on my life. From the first game, the story of Altair, I've consistently cherished this franchise through the years as I've grown up. But nothing quite epitomizes my love for the series more than the games of Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and Assassin's Creed Revelations, aka the Ezio Trilogy. As life moves on, so do our interests, our loves. But Assassin's Creed, or more specifically, the Ezio Trilogy, has always stuck with me through the years, as above and beyond the rest. So, as we enter a new decade, as we enter a new era of Assassin's Creed games, I thought it would be great to look back on this once universally loved and praised franchise, and see what made this trilogy so loved. Before we get into the main section of the video though, it would really help me if you could hit like, and if you watch through and want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe. Also, comment down below before the video starts saying what your favourite moment from the Ezio Trilogy is. And without further ado, Assassin's Creed 2.
Buongiorno, Ezio.
Buongiorno a voi, madre.
You Giovanni's kid?
No, idiota. He just happens to look exactly like the man.
Do you think me blind and deaf, son? Wait.
What are you doing?
Don't you recognize me? It's a me, Mario!
Uncle Mario.
Here we are. That's Caterina Sforza, daughter of the Duca di Milano. Her husband is...
Husband?
Si, her husband is the Lord of Forli.
How are you finding Venezia?
It has its charms. But how do you deal with this smell? The schifo.
So? What brings you to me?
Ezio! Ezio auditore!
You've worked hard, my son. I feel your tired body in need of comfort and succor.
Ezio, meet Bianca. Bianca, Ezio.
Charmed. There is no book or teacher to give you the answers. To show you the path. Choose your own way. Do not follow me. Or anyone else.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
Best. Never change.
And may it never change us.
After the success of Ubisoft's Prince of Persia spin-off, Assassin's Creed, released in 2007, the company made the decision to move forward with a sequel, entrusting Patrice to potentially manifest the original game into a fully fledged franchise. And after Assassin's Creed 2 released on the 17th of November 2009, it was safe to say Desilets succeeded. Not only did Assassin's Creed's successor act as a near-perfect sequel to the first, but it came entrenched in the gaming community as one of the best insular games of all time. Patrice had a clear vision in mind when going into Assassin's Creed 2, to continue the overarching story of Desmond Miles after the first game left him on the verge of execution. But when it was all said and done, Ubisoft achieved another goal entirely. They created a legend. Assassin's Creed 2's main success, the focus of so many people's love for the franchise now, stemmed from within minutes of the game's opening. From the very start, Ubisoft thrust the player straight back into the confused and intriguing ending of his predecessor. No time is wasted explaining any background from the original, as Desmond and the player are thrown from a birth scene in the Animus to the trunk of a car. No hand-holding, no explanations. But whilst the birth scene is swift and leaves the player both shocked and confused, it does something else. This scene is the first time that we ever see the character that has become my favourite fictional character of all time, Ezio Auditore da Firenze. We see a baby destined to become a legend, but still just a baby. It could be argued that this scene could be removed from the game entirely, but it does serve a huge purpose within our attachment to this newborn protagonist. Not only do we immediately form an attachment to his mother, as the sight of a woman giving birth is enough for anyone to sympathise, but we are also filled with the fear for his father as he watches his silent son for what feels like endless moments, clearly with the belief that this boy won't live. But we're relieved as after a couple of button presses, Ezio lets out a roaring cry, and with that we see the first moments of a father and his son.
Fine set of lungs.
And what shall we call him, my love?
Ezio. Ezio Auditore da Firenze.
After finally reaching some kind of clarity after the mind-boggling opening, we're introduced to two of the most loved characters in the series. Rebecca Crane, the cocky tech whiz with the ability to do everything Abstergo does in double time, and Sean Hastings, the quick-witted dickhead who's far too relatably done with everyone's bullshit to hate. And then the player once and for all lands in the true meat and potatoes of the game, the Animus. As Desmond gets plugged in, we're blinded with sheer white until we eventually see the beautiful rooftops of 1476 Florence come into view. We see an eagle's view of the city, from the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore, the Palazzo Vecchio, and finally the Ponte Vecchio, as we're brought down to earth to see a crowd gathering. We see one footstep, then another, and with a pan up, we get our first look at who, in my opinion, came to be the greatest character in all of gaming, and my favourite character in all of fiction, Ezio Auditore. Or at least, we get our first clothed look at him. From here, we're taken on a tutorial of sorts, which immediately not only gives the player a hand into the mechanics of the game, but straight away shows the defining characteristics of a young Ezio. He's arrogant, brash, a natural leader who exudes confidence, but doesn't always know what's best for himself, letting pride get the better of him until his brother convinces him to see a doctor. We see some bonding moments between the two, a quick race, before we get the true opening of the game, a magnificent shot mixed with Jesper Kid's beautiful score and dialogue that perfectly foreshadows what's to come, a scene that still gives me goosebumps to this day.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
The best. May it never change.
And may it never change us.
Moving on from here, we get more of a peek into the impulsiveness of Ezio, leaping off the tower before making his way to Cristina Vespucci, and, well, you know what happens next. From here, the game puts us not in thrilling chase missions and gripping sword fights, but into the average day of a teenage boy. Ezio helps his sick brother collect feathers, he comforts his heartbroken sister, and he helps his mother collect an errand. The errand in question, of course, being to a young artist's workshop. Here, we don't get a major expositional scene, we don't get massive text showing us who Ezio's just met. But we know this man is Leonardo da Vinci, to us, the world famous artist and engineer, but to Ezio, a kind-hearted, enthusiastic artist that would go on to be his friend for years to come. These menial tasks, what some would call boring missions, are an essential part of why this game's narrative, why Ezio's story goes on to be so fantastic. But we'll get to that later. For now, we must witness the tragic hanging of Ezio's father and brothers, and every single time I play this segment, the betrayal by Roberto, the foreshadowing of Rodrigo Borgia, the performance by Roger Craig Smith, I get goosebumps.
bring this to Messer Roberto.
Ezio Auditore? What are you doing here at this hour?
I don't...
Wait, child. Take a breath. Collect your thoughts.
My father and brothers have been imprisoned. I was told to bring you this.
I see now. It's a misunderstanding, Ezio. I'll clear everything up.
How?
The documents you've given me contain evidence of a conspiracy against your family and against the city. I'll present these papers at their hearing in the morning, and they'll be released.
Thank you, Signore.
Giovanni Auditore! You and your accomplices stand accused of the crime of treason. Have you any evidence to counter this charge? Yes, the documents that were delivered to you last night. I'm afraid I know nothing of these documents.
He's lying! Need to get closer.
In the absence of any compelling evidence to the contrary, I am bound to pronounce you guilty. You and your collaborators are hereby sentenced to death. You are the traitor, Roberto, and one of them. You may take our lives this day, but we will have yours in return, I swear! We will!
Father!
There! Grab the boy! He's one of them!
I'll kill you for what you've done!
Moving on from this point, Ezio was introduced to the first of many memorable side characters and mentors within this game, Paola. Not only are we taught some basic stealth mechanics here, but we also see Ezio grow his bond with Claudia and Leonardo before making his way to take revenge on those who betrayed him, starting with Uberto Alberti, and here we get another unforgettably chilling scene.
The Auditori are not dead! I'm still here! Me! Ezio! Ezio Auditore!
Following this, Ezio escorts his family away from the city and into the mountains, where he's cut off by Vieri de Pazzi, the first foe we see Ezio face. But then we get a surprise save from Ezio's uncle, who for whatever reason quotes a certain Nintendo character.
You have my thanks.
Keep the sword, Ezio.
Do I know you from somewhere?
Don't you recognize me? It's me, Mario!
Ezio at this point has no reason to fight, wanting to take his family to Spain before they're found, despite Mario being able to keep him in Monteriggioni for a few days. But after Ezio finds out the truth about his father, the assassin, after he's confronted by his uncle for denying his heritage and throwing away his father's death, Ezio makes the decision to follow truly in his father's footsteps. Over the next few sequences, we see Ezio hunt down the Pazzi family and their collaborators, preventing Lorenzo de' Medici from being killed and for the first time coming face to face with Rodrigo Borgia.
Did you honestly think I wouldn't expect you to follow? That I didn't plan for it?
The most important part of this chunk of the game, however, comes early on, in the countryside of Tuscany, with Ezio joining his uncle in a campaign to eliminate the influences of Vieri de' Pazzi once and for all. After doing this deed, we see Ezio scream and spit on Vieri, with the rage and vengeance clearly consuming his mind. But after Mario calms him down, we get Ezio's first true lesson throughout the series, as he grows from a boy to a man.
I'm sorry. Were you hoping for a confession? Pezzo di merda! Vorrei solo che avessi sofferto di più! Hai avuto la fine che meritavi! Spero che
Enough, Ezio! Show some respect.
Respect? After all that's happened, do you think he would have shown either of us such kindness?
You are not Vieri. Do not become him. Che la morte ti dia le pace che cercavi. Requiesca in pace.
Vieri in many ways acts as an exact mirror for Ezio, the image of what he could have become with a lack of the right guidance, filled with hatred, greed and lust for power. But Mario maintains Ezio to be grounded on the path that eventually leads to him being such a good man. Of course, after this Pazzi section, Ezio makes his way to Venice in hopes to find the rest of the men responsible for his family's death. And may I say, the fact that Ubisoft built the whole of Romagna and Forli for a single main game mission is insane. Of course, this mission is saving Caterina Sforza from a random rock in the middle of the sea, introducing us to a character who doesn't appear again until the DLC sequences. Ezio and Leonardo reach Venice together, and after some quick exposition from the most annoying tour guide on earth, Ezio heads to the Palazzo della Seta on the hunt for Emilio Barbarigo, and this is where he meets Rosa and on from her Antonio. Personally, Venice is my favourite section of the game, as over the sequences, Ezio takes down the Barbarigo family in numerous different unique gameplay situations and missions. As well as this, here we build up even more relationships with some great mentors such as Bartolomeo, Antonio, and Teodora. Gameplay wise, this section of the game probably provides the most memorable missions and the most memorable assassinations. However, story wise, it's largely focused on the relationships as opposed to Ezio's greater story. After a couple sequences in which Ezio hunts down the nobles of Venice, with the help of Antonio, Teodora, and Bartolomeo, we reach Ezio's 29th birthday, and as he talks to Rosa, we see Ezio somewhat lost, having succeeded in taking down the majority of his family's traitors, but now stuck without a true path, a true purpose to fight for.
There you are, Ezio. Why so serious?
It's my birthday.
Davvero? 100 di questi giorni. That's wonderful.
Is it? It's been over 10 years since I watched my father and brothers die. 10 years hunting the men responsible. So close to the end now, but no closer to understanding what any of it was for.
And then, all of a sudden, Leonardo appears, and after a quick discussion, Ezio comes to an epiphany, a great realization of that which was blinded to him by his vengeance and his youth. He realizes the Templars are in search of the piece of Eden his uncle told him of 10 years prior.
Wait. What if that's why they sent the ship to Cyprus? To find this piece of Eden and bring it back to Venezia?
When the second piece is brought to the floating city,
the Prophet will appear. Only the Prophet can open the vault. My God! When my uncle told me about the Codex, I was too young, too brash to imagine it was anything but an old man's fantasy. But now I see. The killing of Mocenigo, even the Medici, my father and brothers. It was all part of his plan. To find the vault. The Spaniard.
Here we go through a brilliant set piece in which Ezio tracks down the apple, follows a courier, disguises himself in order to come face to face with the man truly responsible for his family's death.
Ezio, it's been some time.
Rodrigo. So, where is he?
Who?
Your prophet. Doesn't look like anybody showed up, Rodrigo. How many people have died for these? For what's in this box? And look, there's nobody here.
You claim not to be a believer, and yet here you are. Don't you see him? The prophet is already here. I am the prophet. Now give me the apple.
Come and take it from me.
Here, alone, Ezio stands his ground against Rodrigo and his guards. That is until his uncle appears, alongside La Volpe, alongside Bartolomeo, Antonio, alongside all of those that have mentored him throughout his life. After standing by Ezio, forcing the soon-to-be Pope to flee, we see a mysterious man enter, explaining to Ezio, finally, the part that he is to play, explaining that he is the prophet, forementioned in the prophecy of the Apple of Eden.
Teodora! What? What are you all doing here?
Perhaps the same thing you are, Ezio. Hoping to see the prophet appear.
I came here to kill the Spaniard. I couldn't care less about your prophet. He never showed up.
No? But you did.
What?
A prophet's arrival was foretold. And unbeknownst to us, here you are. Perhaps all along, you were the one we sought.
This man, Niccolo di Bernardo de Machiavelli, explains that all the mentors, all of those Ezio has met throughout the years, are assassins. I said earlier that the menial tasks Ezio completes in the early stages of the game are essential for his character and for the narrative, and I do stand by that. Sure, they lay out the majority of the gameplay mechanics, but they do so much more. In just a couple of missions, they show the love and care Ezio has and will forever have for those related to him, to his family. 20 years later, Ezio may have lost that family. But despite that great loss, Ezio is not alone. Mario, Volpe, Paola, Bartolomeo, Antonio, his mother, his sister, Leonardo, they are all connected by Ezio, brought together by this foretold prophet, by this boy turned man who they've seen grow for decades. Not only are they friends, not only are they mentors, not only are they assassins, but they're family. They are Ezio's family. And as Ezio's inducted fully into his new family, his brotherhood, we're reminded of the actual creed that the assassins follow.
Where other men blindly follow the truth, remember,
Nothing is true.
where other men are limited by morality or law, remember,
Everything is permitted.
we work in the dark to serve the light. We are assassins.
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
Following this comes two sequences that were removed from the original game, later added as DLC. Despite coming with some backlash, in retrospect it was a good decision for these chapters to come as extra content. Although they have some quality moments, fleshing out Caterina in the city of Forlì, as well as bringing Ezio back to an unrecognisably darker Florence, the chapters provide little to the game both in gameplay and story, being filled with monotonous repetitive assassination missions and not showing any necessary growth for Ezio that the player would see outside the DLC. That being said, the speech at the Bonfire of the Vanities is one of Ezio's greatest moments, so I personally always play the DLC. However, it might not be a negative to provide players the option to skip these sections.
Silenzio! Silenzio! 22 years ago, I stood where I stand now and watched my loved ones die, betrayed by those I had called friends. Vengeance clouded my mind. It would have consumed me, were it not for the wisdom of a few strangers who taught me to look past my instincts. They never preached answers, but guided me to learn from myself. We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. Not Savonarola, not the Medici. We are free to follow our own path. There are those who will take that freedom from us. Too many of you gladly give it. But it is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human. There is no book or teacher to give you the answers, to show you the path. Choose your own way. Do not follow me or anyone else.
This brings us up to 1499, in which, after retrieving all 30 codex pages, Ezio meets his assassin brothers back at Monteriggioni. The way codex pages connected AC1 to its sequel in a subtle but still recognisable way is a storytelling device that's lost on the Assassin's Creed games of recent, with the subtlety and nuance of the connections between Altair, Ezio and Desmond over the following 3 games being replaced now with on-the-nose references and terrible writing. But let's just not talk about those new games right now. Ezio and the player decode the pages, coming to the realization that the vault they're looking for is inside the Vatican, and the game basically sets up perfectly a follow-up sequel in Rome. But instead, they do it in 10 minutes. Ezio makes his way to Rome, climbing the Vatican and making his way through Rodrigo's fortress, utilizing everything he's learned, from stealth, a short horse chase, multiple battle sequences, and a little bit more stealth, until he reaches an unpainted Sistine Chapel. Because, you know, this is when Ubisoft still gave a shit about historical accuracy. Ezio drops down, attempting to assassinate Rodrigo, but he utilizes the papal staff to repulse Ezio away. Then we get a fantastic piece of fanservice, as Ezio, mirroring the ability we saw used in the previous game, creates multiple illusions of himself, creating a posse to take on the old yet powerful Pope. After a short fight and a close yet unattainable victory, Rodrigo takes down Ezio, stealing the apple and leaving him to die after stabbing him. And here is where you're meant to have the armor of Altair. A subtle connection, but the stab Ezio sustains has survived due to this armor. That is the entire reason for Rebecca telling Desmond that he needs it for full synchronization. But even if the player doesn't have the armor, it still technically works, so I guess I'm just nitpicking. Ezio gets up, making his way into the vault to find Rodrigo, in a desperate state, an old, grovelling man, realizing that he has deluded himself for life, that he is some sort of prophet.
No more ancient artifacts. No more weapons. Let us see what you are made of, old man.
Alright then, if that's how you want to play it.
Perhaps this realization of Rodrigo is the reasoning for him accepting defeat after a quick fistfight with Ezio. Not promising money or power, not begging for mercy, but accepting death, showing that Rodrigo, as well as Ezio, has grown immensely as a character despite a lack of appearance. No longer driven by greed, by the promise of power under the vault, nor by the delusions of his grandeur, Rodrigo accepts he is just a man fully capable of being killed.
Get it over with, then.
No. Killing you won't bring my family back. I'm done.
However, Ezio decides to not go through with it. He, for the past 20 years at this point, has been from place to place, taking revenge on all of those involved in the murder of his family. But here, we see an older, more mature and more rational Ezio, with a new family. A man no longer consumed by vengeance, a man finally free of the pain that once shackled him. At this point, Ezio is a man fighting for a greater cause than simple revenge, and his decision to spare an old man's life, a man he's hunted for decades, is one that is only right to make. So, leaving Rodrigo, Ezio enters the vault and finds something that would leave players confused, dazed and hungry for answers for the following year, and something that would leave Ezio confused for even longer. Minerva's message, once again, provides Assassin's Creed 2 another cryptic cliffhanger ending, similar to his predecessor, however this time it does so even more. Explaining the oncoming end of the world, Minerva lays out temples needing to be found in order to prevent the human race being wiped out again, setting up what should have been the overarching plot for all of the following games. And then she addresses Desmond directly, explaining to him that Ezio is but a messenger for him, to show him what he needs to do in order to prevent this catastrophe. And as Minerva disappears, as Ezio's confused face fades to black, Desmond says exactly what the player is thinking.
The rest is up to you, Desmond.
What? Who is Desmond? I don't understand. Please, wait. I have so many questions. What the fuck?
As credits roll, the player takes on a playable epilogue, in which the gang have to escape their hideout, and after Lucy gives Desmond Ezio's hidden blade, which she somehow has, we see how he's grown through the bleeding effect, taking on Abstergo guards with the skill and precision of an assassin, mirroring his and Lucy's escape at the beginning of the game. When it comes to gameplay, the majority of the systems within Assassin's Creed 2 are very similar to the original, which is why this retrospective didn't talk much of them. But when it comes to specifically the mission structures of the game, the team at Ubisoft basically eliminated all criticisms of Assassin's Creed 1, with nearly every single mission having some unique aspect that would provide memorability to the player. From the flying mission, the entire Carnival sequence, and of course the introduction of one of the best features in the game series, the Assassin's Tombs, Assassin's Creed 2 did a great deal to improve the repetitive cycles of the first game. However, where the major jumps in gameplay really began were in Brotherhood, so we'll be focusing more on them in the next retrospective. Honestly, to say that Assassin's Creed 2 is a masterpiece of storytelling is an understatement. Potentially forgotten over the years due to the seemingly hundreds of formulaic copies of Ezio's revenge story, Assassin's Creed 2 provided us the birth of one of the greatest characters in all of video games, hell, in all of entertainment, and showed the potential for what this series could become. Not only this, but it also provided a fantastic follow-up to the original, building on the story laid before as opposed to sweeping over it. And despite the copycats, despite the underwhelming future that the games might have had to come, Assassin's Creed 2 began one of the best trilogies of all time, hands down. And the best was yet to come.
Roma.
Welcome to the Rosa in Fiore, stranger.
Ezio! Leonardo!
Is the world not marvelous?
Some of it.
If I want to live, I live. If I want to take, I take. If I want you to die, you die! Where is the piece of Eden?
Stop!
Give it to me. You can do with it as you will later.
Mario, our father, the brother, once stood around this fire, fighting off the darkness. Now, I offer the choice to you.
Go kill them, Mentore. Finish what you started.
Good advice.
I intend to write a book about you one day.
If you do, make it short.
Being released only 9 months after its predecessor, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood improved on its prior two games exponentially, but at the same time fairly subtly. At the time of release, the most major upgrade came in the announcement of a multiplayer mode, revealed in one of the earliest leaks of Ubisoft Montreal's newest project. And considering that this entirely separate game mode would be attached to a mainline game, along with the minuscule development cycle the studio had, it enlisted 4 other studios, mainly Ubisoft Annecy, to aid in the game's development. But when it comes to the development of Brotherhood, there's one major event that's had a lasting impact on the series to today. You see, during Brotherhood's development, the father of Assassin's Creed as a concept and the main visionary behind the success of the first 2 games, Patrice Desilets, decided to leave Ubisoft indefinitely. Originally said to simply be a creative break from the company, Desilets' absence became much longer, and it became clear that something involved in Brotherhood's development sent the creative plans of Desilets down the drain. Over the years, we've heard snippets of what Patrice's original vision was, a plan of 5 games in total, telling Desmond's story fully, and ending with him effectively gaining the Isu power to warp time. Regardless of my opinion of that original plan, it's clear that Desilets' original vision was one of a solid base, and one that he clearly had intentions to end. But considering the huge profit margins Ubisoft gained after Assassin's Creed 2, the higher-ups more than likely had every desire to prevent that from happening. However, with that drama out of the way, Ubisoft were able to fully complete what I believe to be mostly Desilets' vision of Brotherhood, with the game being released on November 16, 2010. And it was immediately clear that this apparent rush sequel, this supposed half game, was so much more than that. And it began with the gameplay. The jump from Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 2 when it comes to gameplay was fairly noticeable, but pretty much only in the mission structure. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, on the other hand, ramps up the gameplay exponentially. To put it simply, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is stuffed to its brim with content. This game, despite again only having 9 months in between the last, brought every single aspect of Assassin's Creed 2 and ramped it up a notch. Starting with the combat mechanics, Brotherhood came out the gate swinging, implementing an upgraded system in which the focus is much more on offensive play, as opposed to the slow-paced parry and dodge system of the previous. Regardless of which you prefer, it's hard to say that it's not intensely fun racking up a huge kill streak without taking a single hit, and this combat system is used to its fullest in the VR training section of the game, which brings us on nicely to the main focus of Brotherhood, and maybe the biggest reason I consider Brotherhood the best Assassin's Creed game. The side content. When looked at on face value, Brotherhood may appear to be a fairly small game. The main story is only 9 sequences, and Rome, despite being fairly huge, doesn't appear as massive as the numerous cities from the previous games. However, when you dig even slightly deeper into the side content of the game, you find a goldmine. Of course, mentioned earlier, the multiplayer was a huge selling point when it came to side content, and for its time, it was actually refreshingly engaging. But there's so much more to it than that. So here, I'm pretty much just going to go through every single piece of side content in this game. Firstly, the Leonardo da Vinci missions. Introduced early on, the flying mechanic so heavily advertised in AC2 makes a return, along with a plethora of other brilliant stealth missions to find other inventions, such as a tank, an early machine gun, and an early warboat. Not only do these missions implement insanely fun new gameplay mechanics, but they allow for Leonardo to be in this game for a real purpose. Moving on from here, we get the guild missions, fleshing out the thieves, courtesans, and mercenaries, as well as Ezio's relationship with his mother, sister, with La Volpe, and with Bartolomeo and his wife. These guild missions alone are brilliant, but are brought up a notch by one of this game's greatest assets, the Brotherhood system. Early on, the idea of this game taking place within a war is set up, and it's immediately clear that Ezio can't take down the Borgia on his own, and so he begins recruiting downtrodden citizens into the Assassin's Brotherhood. This system, of course, provides aid in missions, allowing for backup in huge brawls and easier stealth takedowns, but it also provides the somewhat underrated contract system, in which Ezio can send his recruits to different countries to embark on missions to aid the Brotherhood. Although not hugely in depth, I love the way you can micromanage this system, building up your army and gaining money and materials whilst you do it. Speaking of money, the economic system is another place where Brotherhood shines. Beginning in AC2, Brotherhood again ramps the system up, allowing for near hundreds of buildings throughout Rome to be renovated, from blacksmiths to brothels, from art merchants to the Colosseum itself. The system gives back just as much as you give in, as if the player invests early on, it allows for a much easier time acquiring supplies later on, especially for completionists, and overall, the system just adds more immersion to the player's experience. I could honestly rant about the quality and the quantity of the side content in this game for hours on end, but instead of that, I'm just going to list off a few more great pieces of side content. Of course, the 2 DLC sections are more than solid, fleshing out Leonardo and introducing Copernicus. The Cristina missions are great, and I'll go through them more later. The Tombs of Romulus, which are brought back from AC2, are at exactly the same quality, if not greater, despite the horrific armour Ezio gets as a reward. The truth puzzles are fantastic, fleshing out the modern day even more, and allowing those hardcore fans to dive into lore. The Abstergo agent missions, in which Ezio hunts down lower members of the Templars' ranks, makes the Order of the Templars feel so much more expansive and powerful at multiple levels of society. The countless collectibles, most of which are fairly interesting to collect with some kind of mini parkour puzzle to reach them, are good time fillers when you have nothing else to do. To say Ubisoft Montreal went above and beyond with filling this game with more than just story, giving a tangible reason for the sprawling open world, in my opinion is their greatest achievement with this game. And the way much of the side content is unlocked through actual progression just adds to the immersion of the already fantastically crafted Rome. Every single piece of content is crafted near to perfection, and not only does it supplement the main narrative, giving more insight into the Borgia and the rest of the assassins, but at times it can overtake the story, which is why I always make sure to complete it every single time I replay the game. And with that, let's move on to the main story, and see if Ubisoft were truly able to perfect a continuation of Ezio's fantastic story from Assassin's Creed 2.
I don't think anyone ever expects to wake up one morning and find themselves caught in the middle of a war between two secret organizations. I know I didn't. But here I am. On one side...
When it comes to the opening of Brotherhood, the game takes many cues from Assassin's Creed 2. Immediately, the player is thrown essentially straight back into where the previous game left off, with Desmond and the gang on the run, trying to find sanctuary until they can unravel the mystery of the Piece of Eden's location. Within the Animus, we see choppy, seemingly unfinished renderings of a battlefield, before seeing an older Ezio attack a mystery man. This is cut short swiftly, however, as Ezio's memories appear corrupted, and similarly to the first game, Desmond will need to move through his life, unlocking repressed memories until they can find the apple's location, due to the fact that he is so synchronized with Ezio at this point that their mental states are effectively completely intertwined. Before that though, the gang are focused on their new sanctuary, the Monteriggioni villa, or at least what's left of it. This system of intermatching Animus cutscenes and gameplay with that of the modern day again quickly establishes the inherent link between the two, giving the player a taste of what's to come in the Animus. After setting up power throughout the town, Desmond jumps back into Ezio's memories, and here we take off literally from where AC2 ended, with Ezio at a loss for words in the vault under the Vatican.
It is done. The message is delivered. We are gone now from this world. All of us. We can do no more. The rest is up to you, Desmond.
What? Who is Desmond? I don't understand. Please wait. I have so many questions.
Making his way out, with Rodrigo Borgia having fled, Ezio is reunited with a familiar face, his uncle, as the two make their way out of the city in a quick semi-tutorial not too dissimilar to that of AC2's bridge fight. Making their way to the top of a tower with plans to destroy the apple, Ezio hesitates, and so Mario takes the Piece of Eden for safety, and the two make their way down the tower in the only way an assassin knows, and here we get yet another chilling opening title scene.
This decision is yours alone to make. Only do so quickly. Give it to me. You can do with it as you will later.
Bene.
Jump!
James from As Always Entertainment made a fantastic video on the power of Assassin's Creed openings, so I'll link that in a card on whichever side of the screen it's on, and I'll link it down below. From here, the player is transported back to Monteriggioni, and once again we face a sequence not hugely dissimilar in tone to its predecessor. We see Ezio, cherished by the people of his rebuilt town, go about helping all citizens who need it. We see a man who spent the last 20 years of his life fighting, finally at peace. Finally free of the burden that was his revenge, and finally able to live a true life.
Do not spend as much time in battle as your Uncle Mario.
My battles have already been won.
That is good news. Arrivederci, Ezio.
Unfortunately though, this piece is short-lasted. After Machiavelli leaves for Rome, and yet another scene of Ezio, getting getting down, Monteriggioni is attacked, and we quickly realise that Ezio's decision to let Rodrigo live may not have been ideal in the long term. After protecting the town for as long as possible, it's eventually overrun, and here we're introduced to the main antagonist of Brotherhood, a man less concerned with subtle power grabs like his father, and much more focused on nationwide domination. Cesare Borgia, the leader of the papal forces, a man potentially stronger than his papal father. And then we witness a tragedy the likes of which Ezio hasn't experienced in decades.
The Pope told me about you and your little group of assassins. And this! To be the godless friend fashioned for us. We've had too much bloodshed. I think a cleansing is in order. So consider this an invitation from my family to yours.
After a quick escape and a wound-inflicted knockout, Ezio awakens in a mysterious house, seeing a stranger caring for his wounds. Here, after losing the armor of Altair, Ezio redresses in his new robes provided by an unknown man, his new battle armor, signifying the resurgence of a threat, of a mission for Ezio to undertake, again drawing parallels with Assassin's Creed 2, whilst providing a more subtle, yet no less beautiful new outfit that would go on to be iconic as Ezio's master robes. He makes his way outside, to a blinding view of a sunny Rome day, from the outskirts of the city. Thanking his unknown guardian angel, he makes his way to heal himself and recoup with his allies. After a quick introductory segment to Rome, which shows the terrible state of such a great city brought upon by the Templars, Ezio meets again with Machiavelli and discusses the Borgia's influence on the city. Here we're introduced to the Borgia Towers, another great piece of side content, as well as the economic system, and a hint to the Brotherhood system to come. Over the next few sequences, the main narrative is slow, taking its time to not only introduce the various pieces of side content, but also reunite Ezio with old friends. However, the story begins to pick up around sequence 4, with one of the best missions in the entire franchise, in which Ezio breaks into the fortress that is the Castel Sant'Angelo in order to rescue Caterina Sforza from imprisonment. Here we're introduced to the warped romance between Cesare and his sister Lucrezia, as well as being shown that both Cesare and Rodrigo are to take leave from Rome for a notable amount of time. This gap in time with a vacuum of power is the catalyst to the true story of this game, that of the preparation for civil war within the city, between the Assassins and Templars. Ezio begins recruiting civilians to the cause, an idea Machiavelli isn't exactly hugely fond of. However, we see there's a growing respect and trust between the two. This trust, however, is shaken over the next few sequences. The middle section of this narrative, for the most part, is intended to continue the relationships Ezio made in Assassin's Creed 2. The Templars he tracks down, that being the banker, the Baron di Valois, and Cesare's personal hitman Micheletto, aren't exactly the most fleshed out or interesting antagonists, and aren't nearly as memorable as the Templars in Assassin's Creed 2. However, these flaws are counteracted both by interesting mission structure and engaging side plots. The first of these side plots is with Claudia. Since midway through AC2, Ezio and Claudia's relationship was fairly fractured, through a mixture of him being distant and her effectively having to become her mother's carer. These cracks are taken to their limit when Claudia deliberately goes against Ezio and comes to Rome instead of Florence, and after she becomes the leader of the Rosa and Fiore, her and Ezio's encounters are smattered with passive aggressiveness and disagreement. Over the first of these following 3 sequences, however, Claudia proves herself, not only finding Ezio the information he needs to take down the banker, but also single-handedly taking down an attack on the brothel. This side plot, in my opinion, adds a lot to probably the most underused and forgotten character in AC2, developing her from helpless little sister to a strong, determined leader. This is something Ezio has to come to terms with, but as he does, we see him make the decision to officially grant her the rank of assassin, leading to Ezio and Claudia not just being siblings, but also genuine allies. The second of these side plots comes with La Volpe and Machiavelli. Early on it's revealed that Volpe believes Machiavelli to be a traitor, however Ezio dispels the idea. Over time though, evidence begins to build up, and eventually Ezio's word isn't enough to convince the thief. However, at the very end of Sequence 7, Ezio finds out that the true traitor to the Brotherhood is actually a fighter from Monteriggioni, one that Ezio briefly meets in the town's siege. This leads to a race against time to prevent La Volpe assassinating Niccolo, and ends in a reinforced trust not only between Machiavelli and Volpe, but also between Volpe and Ezio. These increased building of relationships, and in particular the increased wisdom of Ezio, as he shows time and time again that his judgment is a good one, leads to Machiavelli officially making Ezio the mentor of the Brotherhood. The one to lead this now fully fledged Brotherhood into a war, and the scene reinforces the huge growth the relationship between the two has had through the game.
You and I have not seen eye to eye on many issues.
Niccolo!
But you are exactly what the Order needed. You have led the charge against the Templars and rebuilt this Brotherhood. Now we must put Ezio where he belongs, at the head of the assassins. Ezio Auditore da Firenze. You will now be known as Il Mentore, the guardian of our order and our secrets.
Why this sudden change of heart?
I have always stood by you. I was the one who brought you to Roma, and the one who caused the explosion as you fled the Castello. The mercenari who protected you at Il Colosseo were mine as well. You just did not know it. The decision is yours, not mine.
Niccolo, you better not stop telling me what you think. Why else would I seek the opinion of my most trusted advisor?
Go kill them, Mentore. Finish what you started.
Good advice.
I intend to write a book about you one day.
If you do, make it short.
Before we move on to the end sequences of the game, I feel like this is a good time to mention Cristina. The Cristina missions in this game, unlocked through progression, are fantastic in fleshing out the character as more than the object she was in Assassin's Creed 2. We see that Ezio and Cristina's relationship was one true, and not a simple fling, but a genuine love strung about by a lucky, despite slightly creepy second chance. We see the major contrast between the two's lives, seeing what could have become of Ezio had he not embarked on his responsibilities and burdens. We see what he truly gave up, what he was forced to give up, in order to carry out his duties, and this allows for insight into why he's done little in the way of genuine relationships over the years. It also provides a fantastic setup for what's to come in Revelations, but we'll get to that later. First and foremost, we have to witness the tragedy of this love story, as after decades of being apart, finally it looks as if Ezio and Cristina can be together, before she's taken away from him, his last remnant of his past life before the assassins, and fate grasps away the couple's second chance.
I wish we could have had a second chance.
Requiescat in pace, my love.
Moving on from that tragedy, we enter the final chapters of this war for Rome, as we see a truly prime Ezio, a wise man, not arrogant or brash like he was in his youth, yet not tired and old as we see him in Revelations. This master assassin, with Cesare having returned, makes his way back to the Castel San Angelo for his full frontal assault on the Borgia, and for his chance to take back the Apple of Eden. Here, finally, after 27 years of build-up, Ezio witnesses the death of Rodrigo Borgia, the man responsible for the death of his father and brothers, and the man responsible for him embarking on his life as an assassin. However, this death comes not as a satisfying victory, but as a bittersweet end to a brilliant arc. Rodrigo begins his story purely power-obsessed, entirely self-indulged, with the belief that he's the prophet. But as the decades go on, as the Spaniard is shown that he is but a man, as Ezio shows him the limits to his power, as he grows wiser, a sense of sympathy comes for the old man's death at the hands of his son. Rodrigo's redemption and attempting to kill Cesare is the perfect ending to his story, showing a man who's learned there's more to life than power, seeing his younger self reflected tenfold in his son, who at this point is a borderline psychopath. It's a solemn moment, so seeing Ezio pay him his respects in death is somewhat heartwarming, as it shows the mutual respect that both the men gain for each other despite them being enemies.
Get out of my way, old man. I gave you everything, and yet it's never enough.
Cesare! He intends to poison you!
I control all of this. If I want to live, I live. If I want to take, I take. If I want you to die, you die! Where is the piece of Eden?
Stop! I know where it is!
And you did not tell me he had taken it?
Cesare, it's me, your queen.
You are my sister, nothing more. Where is it?
Requiescat in pace.
Following this, after retrieving the location of the apple, Ezio faces a race to reach the St. Peter's Basilica before the now crazed captain. Taking the apple, Ezio faces down Cesare in the courtyard outside the basilica, but due to the poison Rodrigo left him, Cesare is forced to flee, leaving Ezio to take down hordes of papal guards through his newly found weapon of control. But from here, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood's narrative falters slightly. Over the rest of the sequence, the game jumps months at a time, as Ezio and the assassins begin taking down as many Borgia institutes as possible and truly take on their liberation of Rome. Here, all sense of pacing is thrown to the wayside, as Ezio continuously hunts down a now ill Cesare, effectively having his full-scale war within the city, and it's here where I think the minimal development time may have had a slight negative impact on the story. That being said, the section is short and by no means ruins the game's ending, with the underground war climaxing at the gates of Rome, as every remaining assassin, Machiavelli, Claudia, Bartolomeo, La Volpe and Ezio, join together to take down Cesare's remaining forces. After a top-notch battle in the square, they join at the gate, to find Cesare outside it, and to the player's horror, we see an army massing behind him. But just as our fear of failure reaches its peak, we're relieved to see Fabio Orsini, a minor character briefly introduced as an ally of Machiavelli early on in the game. We see Cesare face arrest for his numerous crimes, and the sense of pity that comes with watching how pathetically he resists is drowned out by a minor sense of fear that what he says is true.
No! 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 This is not how it ends! Chains will not hold me! I will not die by the hand of man!
This sense of fear is carried over to Ezio, who uses the apple to, does he look through time? Does he look through space? It's not really explained how Ezio sees Cesare's escape from prison, but I can excuse this slightly convoluted plot point for the brilliant set piece that follows it. We're taken to the olive fields of Vienna, as we see Cesare Borgia has escaped imprisonment and amassed a loyal military. Ezio confronts him, and we are brought back to the confused and unrendered segment of the game we see in the earliest moments.
How did you find me?
The apple you stole from Mario Auditore, let me hear.
Ezio makes his way through the town, through essentially a battlefield, before climbing a rampart to make his way for a final showdown. This final fight with Cesare isn't necessarily worse than that of AC2, but the themes behind it are very, very different. The sense of personal stakes and some of the personal connection so present in the fistfight with Rodrigo is replaced by a much more grandiose, much more theatrical theme, as Ezio and Cesare face off on top of a battlement covered in the deep orange hues of an Italian sunset. Despite the fight not being hugely engaging from a gameplay perspective, it does present more of a challenge than any one we faced prior, and the essence that we are stopping a true tyrant, a crazed warmongerer, is much more present compared to the old pope we faced prior. And as Ezio weakens Cesare, as he's able to take him down, and as we enter the White Room, the fantastic parallels between Assassin's Creed 2 and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood come to light. Rodrigo Borgia, after being defeated in Assassin's Creed 2, shows a huge amount of growth in his character, as he essentially accepts defeat, coming to the realization that he is little more than a man. This growth, this wisdom the man gains, this brilliant character development, is near completely absent as his son faces the same predicament, and that's exactly as it should be. It's shown from the onset of this game that Cesare is a different monster than his father, a man truly evil, a man crazed with power to the point of no return, and despite trying to talk to him, trying to get through to this deranged tyrant, Ezio comes to realize that this monster cannot be redeemed as Rodrigo was, that to leave him alive as he did the old pope would be impossible to justify. So, heeding to the claims that Cesare can't die to the hands of man, Ezio puts his trust in the fate of gravity, dropping Cesare from the castle wall in a death reminiscent of that of Darth Maul, as Ezio finally truly liberates Italy from the Borgia's clutches. Returning to Rome, Ezio comes to the conclusion that whatever information the apple holds, whatever message the first civilization sent, it wasn't for him, and so he hides the apple under Juno's temple. And as Desmond exits the Animus, I think it's now time for me to fully go into the modern day. In my opinion, Brotherhood is far and away the peak of Assassin's Creed modern day story. Sure, the narrative of the main Animus section may not be quite as good as 2 Revelations, but when it comes to the overarching story, Ubisoft hit a climax here that should have continued an upward path. In my opinion, the clear reason for this game reaching the pinnacle of the modern day, before essentially collapsing in later games, was nearly purely due to Patrice Désilet's leave of absence that I mentioned earlier. But sticking to the game at hand, the way the Brotherhood perfectly interweaves the stories of Ezio and Desmond for a genuine reason, whilst maintaining a solid balance between Animus and modern day, provides a great setup for the continuation of the modern day. These days, with Origins and Odyssey, Ubisoft have made it a habit to tell unrelated stories, completely separate from each other. But back in 2010, back in the Ezio Trilogy, Patrice and Ubisoft were focused on completing the single, fully interconnected story that brings 3 generations of assassins together that would otherwise be completely disconnected. Throughout the game, the player can encounter countless pieces of dialogue and content that exclusively connects to the modern day, allowing for the more hardcore fans to get fully immersed in this universe, whilst the more casual fans could sit back and enjoy just Ezio, striking the perfect balance for a section of the game that was criticised by the more casual players. However, these optional pieces aren't just fan service, they hugely add to the story, from the truth, diving more into the story of Subject 16, to the optional dialogue building up the characters. It all increases the connectivity. And as the game comes to an end, Desmond and Ezio's connection is underlined through Desmond, with a little help from Sean, deciphering the passcode to enter Juno's tomb. And as the gang enters after a short parkour section in the Colosseum, the game creates a mirror between Ezio and Desmond that even further makes them divinely linked. We see Juno for the first time, and to say her words as Desmond makes his way to the apple are confusing is an understatement. The way she speaks in riddles and codes, but at the same time in an understanding way, truly gives the impression that she is simply from a far gone era. And as she cryptically reveals what she says to be the truth, as she alludes to the sixth sense that the Isu gained but the humans lacked, as she aids Desmond in making his way to the apple, the tension becomes palpable. As Desmond approaches, we see everyone freeze, with Juno taking control of Desmond's body, and it's here that if the player has paid attention to the side stories, the modern day plot, if they witness the truth that Subject 16 encoded in the Animus, they're brimming with confusion, but also intrigue and minor understanding. And then, Juno lays out the real truth, that Lucy, for whatever reason, must die at the hands of Desmond. It's later revealed that Lucy was a sleeper agent for Abstergo, but the first time someone experiences this moment, it leaves them near paralysed with shock, ironically the same state that Desmond ends up in. This moment comes as one of the best moments in the Assassin's Creed modern day, in my opinion. Not only are the subtle storytelling tools and the slow revelations that Lucy's a traitor fantastically placed, but the moment also has a genuine shock factor, not hugely built up, and by no means a cheap death. Back then, Assassin's Creed was far more willing to take risks, and to say that this one left the player in the same confused state that they were in the previous two is an understatement. This time, it's pure shock.
No!
It is done. The way lies all before you. Only she remains to be found. Awaken the sixth. Go, alone!
Rushed back into the Animus through the credits, the game's modern day perfectly loops into Revelations, and it leaves the game once again on a genuinely interesting and engaging cliffhanger, which in my opinion caps off Brotherhood as one of the best stories in the entire series, and caps off its modern day as the best in the entire series. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood is the closest thing Ubisoft has ever got to perfection. Masterfully balancing the duality of plots, its narrative continues on from the previous two games seamlessly, bringing over the same quality of writing and planning that the first two had in troves, and within this narrative balance, the game provides arguably the best overall content the series may have ever seen. The team on Assassin's Creed at this time continuously learn from their mistakes, taking every flaw from their past games and pouring their heart and soul into improving on them, and this continual improvement peaks during Ezio's second entry. The immersion that was able to be formed, the sheer number of hours that could be used to explore, the huge number of side plots and mission types, Brotherhood brings every aspect that makes Assassin's Creed great and creates perfect harmony, with a clear understanding of not only what a great open world game needs, but truly what a great Assassin's Creed game needs, a concept that has been forgotten over the last decade. And through this, Ubisoft truly did create the best Assassin's Creed game of all time.
Who are you, Messere?
Only the most interesting man in your life.
Ah, che presuntuoso.
For 3 decades, I have served the memory of my father and my brothers, and fought for those who have suffered the pain of injustice. I do not regret those years, but it is time to live for myself, and let them go. Let go of all of this.
Then let go. You will not fall far.
The Ezio Trilogy is my favourite story of all time. And whilst the first 2 games in the series are fantastic on their own steam, it's Revelations that truly encapsulates what's magnificent about this trilogy. Let's start at the beginning with Ubisoft fresh off the heels of 2 masterpieces. And now they gotta conclude the story of a legend created by a man, Patrice desilets, who isn't even with the company anymore. Originally, they were just going to make a Nintendo 3DS game, a game following Ezio travelling to Masyaf to learn Altair's wisdom. Originally, it was going to be titled Lost Legacy, and whilst the idea was cancelled, it wasn't completely forgotten about. After this cancellation, Ubisoft publicly announced that there was going to be no Assassin's Creed game in 2011, but with numerous rumours, numerous leaks coming out, it was clear that there was only one point they were leading to: a final, fully fleshed out Ezio game. Revelation's development was fairly spread, with 6 different studios working on production, but there was one man who sat at the helm of a writing team that really created the best parts of Revelations: Darby McDevitt. Darby, who'd previously worked writing the side games of Discovery and Bloodlines, was finally given the reins to the main titles, and to say he was the best writer to ever touch the franchise goes without saying. McDevitt had the goal in mind of providing satisfying endings to the stories of the series' 2 main characters, and used every ounce of previous lore and events to craft a perfect balance between fanservice, continued intrigue, and a solid main narrative separate from the overarching story. And so that brings us onto the game itself, and whilst it did do fantastic things, it did falter in a couple areas. Revelations opens again with a quick prelude, this time from an initially unknown narrator, as Desmond's recent life is summarised by one Clay Kazmarek, aka Subject 16. Finally, we see the man so often referenced in prior games, the one Lucy couldn't save, the man forever trapped in the hollow, code-riddled world of Animus Island. This island, 16 explains, is the guts of the Animus, a simple test program able to protect Desmond's mind and his ancestors' memories from completely collapsing in on each other. We finally see the result of the visions Desmond's been seeing for the past 3 games, and in order to prevent a complete collapse, Desmond has to re-enter Ezio's memories, creating harmony between his ancestors, and so Desmond falls back into 16th century Europe. Immediately, we see the CGI trailer for Revelations with a quick exposition of Ezio's journey to Masyaf, his intentions to find the wisdom held by Altair. Early on here, there's an establishment of the key to Revelation's narrative, fighting not for power or control, but instead for truth. After escaping his captors and a quick prologue reintroducing the player to the gameplay mechanics, as well as establishing Ezio's more notorious status in this section of the world, we're brought to the sun-glazed river of Constantinople. Here, we see the new city for the first time, and it's safe to say there's been a downgrade. When you look at the open worlds of the previous entries, one major thing stands out: the city's sheer uniqueness. Whether it be the red bricked roofs of Florence, the muddy and grimy Forli, the sprawling grasslands of Tuscany, or the marble ruins of Rome, the player is never in doubt of where they are, or where they're headed. Never do you feel lost, as you travel through the districts of each city, each finely crafted with a completely unique feeling of culture and of people. Constantinople, on the other hand, can feel quite the opposite. Despite still being stunningly beautiful, especially when drenched with the deep orange glow of the Turkish sun, the open world many a time can come off as copy and pasted, allowing for much less in the way of immersive travel, as the player is forced to continuously check the minimap if they don't want to get lost in the closed streets and the often bland housing. Now don't get me wrong, Ubisoft are amazing at creating open worlds, and Revelations is no exception. It does have its fantastic parts of the city, like Galata Tower or Topkapi Palace. But to compare it to Assassin's Creed 2 or Brotherhood, to compare it to the amazingly handcrafted cities of Florence or Rome, well, there's no real comparison. It's here where I feel there may have been some sort of fatigue setting in during the development of this game. Whilst the game reuses the assets of the previous, the work needed to pump out 3 consecutive perfect open worlds is tough, and with the added stress of Assassin's Creed 3 being built from the ground up during the same production time, the studios were somewhat short-handed when creating Revelations. However, this lackluster open world is made up for by the gameplay's biggest improvements, the fantastic set pieces. Starting early, Revelations brings back the most beloved systems of the past 2 games, and while they're by no means revolutionized, they are improved. The Brotherhood system, as well as the Templar tower system, make a return, but this time with some added elements, such as fleshed out side missions with the assassins you recruit and train. Most of these minor additions were received well, but there was one in particular that was completely lambasted ever since the game's release. It's den defense. Usually I quite like den defense, and here it does seem like the natural progression of Ezio as a leader of the assassins, but the gameplay itself is intensely bare bones, uninteresting, and usually pretty easy. The assassin tombs, on the other hand, are brought to another level, becoming a major part of the story and being handcrafted to each provide unique situations and intense set pieces, which are boosted by the upgraded movement mechanics. Oh yeah, and for whatever reason, the economy system is brought back, but it doesn't really make any sense in Constantinople and is never mentioned in the story, so. The two biggest additions to gameplay come with the hook blade and the bomb system, and here I do have kind of an issue. Although both being fundamentally good systems, the way the systems are implemented within the narrative is where the issue comes in for me. Ezio in this game is in his mid-50s and should be weathered down physically, but that's an idea that's only brought about for like 2 dialogue lines total. Here, the hook blade and the bombs could have been a physical indication of that, acting as aids for Ezio's weakening physical abilities. Instead though, Ezio effectively has all the same skills at the same level as his past self, and so it leads the player to basically just keep playing the exact same way as they have for the prior 3 games. This also leaves the new systems to feel somewhat useless and forced in for the sake of progress, and the bomb system in particular lost out, as it was dropped straight after this game despite having potential to be built upon. Revelations by no means reinvents the wheel when it comes to gameplay, but it didn't have to. It was the conclusion to the trilogy, and so it brought back everything we love, all the gameplay systems we love, such as Assassin Tombs, the Brotherhood system, the economy system, and I guess Altair, and it wrapped it up in the perfect bow to tell this amazing final chapter. The narrative of Revelations contains 2 separate sections. That of Ezio finding Altair's keys with the help of Sophia Sartor, and that of Ezio preventing a Templar plot to overrun the city. And to be honest, this separation of stories is the only real downfall in this game's narrative. Personally, whenever I play this game, I can't shake the feeling that Darby McDevitt and his team just wanted to write about Ezio's journey to enter Altair's library, but the management of Ubisoft effectively forced them to include a Templar plot. The plot storyline all too often feels unnatural, with rushed events and unclear character motivations. Each story is begun from the moment Ezio sees the city, and are each rooted in characters that Ezio builds bonds with throughout the game. On one hand, there's Suleiman, the heir to the throne of Sultan, and Ezio's gateway into getting the lost Masyaf key. And on the other hand, there's Sophia Sartor, a Venetian bookkeeper filled with heart that Ezio immediately connects with. Sophia clearly fills Ezio with a renewed sense of life, as he sees a deep passion and love for literature, an outlet the likes of which Ezio never picked up despite his mother's wise words. After giving up on the idea of love after the death of Cristina, Ezio finally is able to open up again to someone. And throughout the game, we see the two connect further, as Ezio's mix of charm, mystery, and wisdom is intertwined with Sophia's burning curiosity and love of knowledge. Again, it's clear which storyline was given priority, as while Ezio and Sophia's journey of collecting books and finding tombs provides brilliant character moments and provides Ezio with added motivation, his relationship with Suleiman as an almost long-lost father and son story is surface level at best, and at worst is forgettable. That being said, the Templar story does provide some quality moments. The wrongful murder of Tarek comes as the first true regret of Ezio throughout all 3 games. Their journey to the hidden city begins and ends with fantastic set pieces, and Ahmet works decently as a twist villain, despite the reveal of his treachery not being too well paced. Oh, and who can forget Ezio dressing up as an Italian minstrel and singing songs of his life.
I sing in Italiano, you understand no word, but my Greek is non-existent and my Turkish is absurd.
Yusuf, as well as the rest of the Assassin Order, are refreshing in this game, as we finally see an Assassin Order somewhat in control of a city for the first time since AC1, and Yusuf himself again provides a youthful soul full of life to invigorate Ezio, with his death caused by his protection of Sophia coming as a tragedy and a true turning point for Ezio to further embrace his role of mentor and leader of the assassins.
You have earned your rest, brother. Requiescat in pace.
Brothers, sisters, the whole city rises against us, while Yusuf's murderer waits and watches from the arsenal, laughing. Fight with me, and show him what it means to cross the assassins.
As these two stories collide in the latter sequences of the game, we do get a climax that is nowhere near on the level of the prior two games. But it does provide an entry to an interesting idea. After some quality gameplay sequences, we get the reveal of the new Sultan, and this highlights Ezio's fear that's been somewhat lingering throughout the game, that his fight for freedom may be one that shall never be achieved. This idea, this feeling that Ezio is fighting for a useless cause, comes up in little parts throughout the game. Hell, throughout the trilogy. And this is where Altair's memories come in. The connection between Altair and Ezio present from AC2 is fully fledged here, as Ezio witnesses memories of Altair throughout his full life, and we get a glimpse of what made him so legendary as an assassin. The story within these missions, the conflict between Altair and Abbas, as well as the fleshing out of the assassin's downfall before he reformed it, is fantastic, especially for only a 6-mission narrative. We see Altair go from the dogmatic, stubborn man we see at the start of AC1, to the enlightened man he becomes after he kills Al-Mualim, to the wise man he becomes after facing the armies of Mongolia and after learning from the Apple of Eden. We see how Altair reformed the Order, doing away with the dogma of Al-Mualim and replacing it with a personal responsibility to do right by the world. Despite losing a son, despite witnessing the death of his wife, despite being cast out, Altair continuously grows, not becoming bitter, but coming to realize his true life's purpose.
Ah, the end of an era. When I was very young, I was foolish enough to believe that our creed would bring an end to all these conflicts. If only I possessed the humility to say to myself, I have seen enough for one life. I have done my part. Then again, there is no greater glory than fighting to find the truth.
Altair comes to realize that neither himself nor the Creed is enough to bring an end to conflict, and as Ezio comes to realize this as well, he finally comes to fully understand the meaning of his creed and the meaning of his life.
You mentioned a creed before. What is it?
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
That is rather cynical.
It would be if it were doctrine, but it is merely an observation of the nature of reality. To say that nothing is true is to realize that the foundations of society are fragile, and that we must be the shepherds of our own civilization. To say that everything is permitted is to understand that we are the architects of our actions, and that we must live with their consequences, whether glorious or tragic.
Finally, Ezio comes to peace with the journey he started all those decades ago. He finds a new chapter of his life with Sophia that he needs to enter, and he finally is ready to let go. As Ezio enters, we prepare to see the huge amount of knowledge contained within these walls that Altair had gained throughout his life. But instead, we see nothing. Nothing but a chair with the remains of a hooded man.
No books. No wisdom. Just you, fratello mio.
Ezio and Altair's connection is finally complete as the two face each other, speaking centuries apart from each other. As Ezio relives Altair's final memories, as Ezio sits with Altair as he dies, and we get the best shot in the entire franchise. We find that Altair has built the sanctuary not for books, but for his piece of Eden, his map of the temples needed to save the world. And as Ezio walks forward, he hesitates.
Another artifact.
And then he refuses to go any further.
No. You will stay here.
Ezio echoes the words spoken all those centuries ago by his brother in arms.
I have seen enough for one life.
He has seen enough for one life. He's done his part. He realizes that he cannot spend his days slaving over the apple as Altair did. And if not for the introduction of Sophia into his life, maybe he would have. He heeds the final words that Altair says to his own son, to go off, to live with his family, and to live well. He comes to realize that he is but a messenger for someone that he cannot see, but he knows is there.
Desmond?
He's talking to me?
I heard your name once before, Desmond. A long time ago. And now it lingers in my mind, like an image from an old dream. I do not know where you are, or by what means you can hear me. But I know you are listening.
And as this connection with Altair completes, so too does his connection with Desmond, as the trio effectively stand in the same room together, centuries apart, sharing wisdom, sharing knowledge, yet unable to see each other.
I have lived my life as best I could, not knowing its purpose, but drawn forward like a moth to a distant moon. And here at last, I discover a strange truth. That I am only a conduit for a message that eludes my understanding. Who are we who have been so blessed to share our stories like this? To speak across centuries? Maybe you will answer all the questions I have asked. Maybe you will be the one to make all this suffering worth something in the end. Now, listen.
Ezio's journey is complete. The prophet has delivered the message, the key to saving the world, and now it's time for him to rest. Removing his bracers, removing his sword, he can leave, to live not as a prophet, but as a man. Following this, Desmond witnesses the entire Capitoline Triad explain the disaster that's to come, that's been foreshadowed in the games for so long, and it's finally revealed where he must go, to the Grand Temple. Desmond has achieved his sync nexus, and after witnessing the destruction of Animus Island, the death of Subject 16, he is finally ready to take his final steps to prevent this catastrophe.
What are you doing? What is a man but the sum of his memories? We are the stories we live, the tales we tell ourselves. Don't do this. I'm saving you, idiot! Go! Go!
It was our duty, mine, Minerva's, and Juno's, to sort and sample all that was collected. We chose those solutions which held the most promise, and devoted ourselves to testing their merits. 6 we tried in succession, each more encouraging than the last, but none worked. And then the world ended.
A beautiful video of the former world, the Isu world, ending through the eyes of a woman and her child is shown before Desmond awakens from his coma to see his friends and his father.
Wait, look, his vitals are stabilizing. Something's happening. He's moving.
Desmond, can you hear me?
son.
I know what we need to do.
Revelation's ending, in a vacuum, may be my favourite ending to any piece of fiction ever, and is for sure my favourite moment in the entire franchise of Assassin's Creed. And it'd be an understatement to say that what came next was disappointing. The ending to this trilogy allowed for so much potential, the potential to tell amazing stories. But instead, Ubisoft's obsession with pumping out underdeveloped games led to miscommunication between different teams making different games, causing the lore to be destroyed. But for me, the overarching story of the first 4 Assassin's Creed games will forever be in my heart. It will never be forgotten, and looking back on what's happened recently, it will never be taken for granted. Revelations is at its best when it embraces the past, embraces the fact that it is the end to this chapter, leaning on gameplay mechanics of old whilst continuing the growth and evolution of the characters. It may be without a doubt the weakest game in the trilogy, but it still maintains the quality of writing, the quality of character, and the quality of gameplay for it to stand as one of my favourite games of all time, as it perfectly ended the story of Ezio Auditore, a man we see from birth to his eventual death in embers. The game has its flaws, but as a conclusion, it is without a doubt effective. These games are the reason I fell in love with gaming as a medium. This trilogy, this character, are the reason I spent years when I was younger learning about series lore, reading books, collecting figures, and watching videos on the Assassin's Creed franchise. And if these games never existed, I can safely say that I would be a different person. I love these games, probably made clear by the fact that I've made 3 half-hour essays explaining why I love these games so much. And now, having played each of the games 9 times, I can safely say that the Ezio Trilogy is my favourite trilogy, my favourite story, and my favourite gaming experience of all time. Ezio Auditore, to me, is the best character in all of fiction, as we not only see him, but somewhat become him, literally from birth to death. We witness every inch of growth and every experience he goes through. We feel his tragedy and loss, we connect with his relatability, and we love him for his charisma, his unbreakable will, and his long-built wisdom, and we see each of these aspects grow and adapt over time. The way Roger Craig Smith adapted his voice to mirror Ezio's character growth is brilliant, and his ever-changing robes again perfectly illustrate how he grows. From the stubborn and wise-ass boy we see on the Ponte Vecchio, to the stoic and trusting man we see rebuild Rome, to the loving father and husband we see on his farm in Tuscany, one aspect of his life always sticks with him: family. No matter who he may be fighting with, he refuses to give up on his brothers in arms. He will fight for his brotherhood, and he will fight for his family. From the first time he puts on his hood to the moment he takes off his bracers, that is what motivates him. Federico, Claudia, Mario, Volpe, Machiavelli, Caterina, Leonardo, Yusuf, Sophia, Flavia, Altair, Desmond. They're all connected. They're all Ezio's family. And as Ezio explains to Xiao Yun, as he writes in his final words, it is not through power by which people will be free. It is not through revenge that our goals will be reached and conflict will be ended. It's through love. Love which binds the assassins together, which binds any people together. And it is love that drives him forward, that has driven him throughout his life. Love for his family.
Ezio Auditore da Firenze. The auditore are not dead! I'm still here! Me! Ezio
Auditore! Theodora! What are you all doing here?
Yours is not a subtle approach.
It's over,
It is a good life.
It reminds me of myself. Wait.
What are you doing? Ezio! 22 years ago, I stood where I stand now, watching my loved ones die.
Brothers, sisters, the whole city rises against us, while Yusuf's murderer waits and watches from the arsenal, laughing.
We are free to follow our own path. There are those who will take that freedom from us. Too many of you gladly give it. But it is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human.
No. Killing you won't bring my family back. I'm done.
Cristina, hold on. I'll get you to a doctor. You're going to be all right.
I don't think I am.
No! Don't go. Stay with me, Cristina.
Ezio, don't you know? I've always been with you. I wish we could have had a second chance.
To say that nothing is true is to realize that the foundations of society are fragile, and that we must be the shepherds of our own civilization. To say that everything is permitted is to understand that we are the architects of our actions, that we must live with their consequences, whether glorious or tragic. No, you will stay here. I have seen enough for one life.
Desmond, I heard your name once before, Desmond. A long time ago.
Now it lingers in my mind, like an image from an old dream.
I do not know where you are, or by what means you can hear me. But I know you are listening.
Get some rest, huh?
When I was a young man, I had liberty, but I did not see it. I had time, but I did not know it. And I had love, but I did not feel it. Many decades would pass before I understood the meaning of all three. And now, in the twilight of my life, this understanding has passed into contentment. Love, liberty, and time, once so disposable, are the fuels that drive me forward. And love, most especially, mio caro. For you, our children, our brothers and sisters, and for the vast and wonderful world that gave us life and keeps us guessing.
endless affection, mia Sophia. Forever yours, Ezio Auditore.